Sinister secrets exposed, 12 spine-chilling tales of psychopaths on the haunted hunt. In the quiet suburb of Maplewood Heights, darkness clung to the streets like a thick fog, the kind that whispered secrets and shadows behind every white picket fence. Sarah, a weary single mother, drove home from her nightly shift. Her heart was a drumbeat against the quiet stillness. She couldn't shake the feeling something was off. The air felt heavier every night, almost suffocating, as if the very universe conspired to keep her awake with fears of the unknown. Families once laughed across yards, but now Sarah noticed the anxiety in every stolen glance, every hushed conversation. Just last week, the Johnson family had vanished without a trace. It felt unreal, like a horror film barreling down reality's road. As she parked her car, her eyes were drawn to the blue house across the street. The porch light flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that seemed to stretch longer, as if reaching out. It had been flickering all week, but the mundane felt precarious amid the uneasiness of a string of disappearances. Inside her modest home, laughter had been replaced by silence, her children already asleep. She tiptoed through their rooms, haunted by whispers of concern as she recalled the strange symbols she discovered on the park's wooden railing earlier that week. The site, once a playground of joy, transformed into a chilling memory marked by carvings that twisted her stomach into knots. Sarah had brushed it off at first, but each symbol echoed with an unsettling significance, like a warning she'd missed in her sleep-deprived haze. Then, the signs of fear escalated. Her neighbor's cat went missing. Then, little Tommy's dog. One by one, the neighborhood pets disappeared. Panic spread like wildfire, leaving behind an uneasy silence during the obligatory neighborhood BBQs. "It's just paranoia," some said. But Sarah felt a knot tightening in her chest each time she saw the flickering light across the street or heard hushed tones at the grocery store. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Days turned to weeks, the environment heavy with uncertainty. Sarah's children whispered about a vengeful spirit, exaggerated tales from bedtime stories morphing into nightmares. Their wide eyes reflected fear that made her blood run cold, visions of foreboding shadows looming in the darkness outside their window. Then came the night she felt it, that cold sweat prickling her skin and the sense of being watched. The tension in her house hit a breaking point. She knew she had to confront this growing darkness. Gathering her courage, she trekked toward the hollowed halls of Maplewood School, shrouded in decay. The rumors of the Watcher, a thing born from neglect, twisted by the very fears it fed on, cried out for recognition. As she stepped into the decaying building, the air thickened, the oppressive darkness wrapping around her. Somewhere deep within, she could hear the echoes of laughter that once filled the air, now distorted and haunting. Every step deeper felt like crashing through barriers of safety, revealing hidden truths anchoring her unresolved dread. Caught between a maternal instinct to protect her children and grappling with her crumbling faith in the community, she wondered, could she truly outrun the very thing watching her? One thing was clear: the flickering lights were not just a nuisance. They were a prelude to something much darker lurking at their doorstep. A chill crept through the air as Sarah navigated the dilapidated halls of Maplewood School, the darkness a powerful entity pressing against her from all sides. A rusted locker door squeaked loudly as she passed, the sound echoing like a warning. Auditory memories from childhood returned, laughter and innocence, a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom now engulfing the building. With each step, her heartbeat reverberated in her ears, a constant reminder of the danger that lay just out of sight. The threat was palpable, she could almost taste it, a metallic tang lingering in her mouth. The flickering lights of the school resembled the blue house across the street. What freighted her more was that she had a terrible feeling that no one else would care if she disappeared too. A thick layer of dust coated the floors, remnants of a forgotten space, unsettling in their silence. She paused in front of a classroom door, the glass cracked and dirty. Beyond the door, something stirred, just out of focus. It felt wrong, the way shadows twisted on the walls as if alive with intent. Should she press on? Her footsteps carried her deeper into the school, past rows of empty desks. In the back of her mind, whispers of her children's fearful tales tickled her nerves. The Watcher, they had called it, a spectral figure lurking, waiting. What drew it was still a mystery. Did fear itself beckon it? Suddenly, a loud bang exploded from the far end of the corridor. Sarah jumped, her heart racing, muscles stiff with adrenaline. She instinctively crouched low behind a wall. Sweat trickled down her back as she strained to listen. The noise sounded like a slamming door, a call to the unknown. With trembling fingers, she peered around the corner. A figure was outlined by the flickering light, standing motionless, bathed in shadows. Was it human? The face was obscured, but an almost palpable sense of malice radiated from the figure. It had a presence that twisted the air. She could feel its gaze, cold and hungry, boring into her. Panic gripped her. Should she run? Or was this what it wanted? To watch her squirm, to twist the fear into something more tangible? Suddenly, the flickering light stabilized for a moment, illuminating the corridor with a harsh brightness that was then snuffed out completely. Now, the darkness enveloped her like a wet sheet. Heart pounding, Sarah fumbled in her bag, frantically searching for her phone. The cold glow of the screen barely pushed back the shadows, but it was something, an anchor in the abyss. Just as she turned, the phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor, shattering the silence. The figure shifted, gliding toward her, its movements unnatural like water flowing illogically across the ground. A tremor ran through her as she stooped to retrieve the phone, scrambling back into the safety of the shadows, the chilling, oppressive entity drawing closer. Just as she found her feet, cold fingers brushed against her shoulder from behind, a touch that froze her in place. "Why do you linger in darkness, Sarah?" A whisper licked against her ear, drenched in malice and despair. She felt sick, bile rising. The voice was familiar and yet foreign, a slithering reminder of what she was fighting against. Fear electrified her veins. She had to act. She turned and ran, her breath sharp and ragged, echoing against the walls as the figure gave chase. But the question screamed in her mind what awaited her at the end of this darkened corridor. She sprinted blindly, her heart thundering, as the chase turned desperate. And then she spotted it, a light spilling from a door at the end. But would it be salvation or another trap of dread waiting to ensnare her? The door loomed larger with each frantic step Sarah took. It was a beacon in a sea of despair, yet its glow felt strangely tainted, as if it was a false promise. The wood creaked under her touch, threatening to splinter as she pushed it open. The moment she crossed the threshold, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, the room was painted white, stark and sterile, almost blinding after the gloomy halls she'd just fled. But it was what lay in the center that drew her eye, an old desk covered in dust, papers piled high, and a single flickering bulb dangling overhead. The air felt heavy, stifling, as if the walls themselves were pressing down on her. The sudden silence was deafening. She stepped further in, her shadow elongating and merging with the darkness outside the doorway. A chill wrapped around her legs, pulling her toward the desk as if some unseen hand beckoned her closer. The urge to rummage through the documents was overwhelming. There might be something, anything that could explain the unsettling presence of the Watcher. Papers flew as she rifled through them, the sound slicing through the silence. Among the chaotic notes, a single page caught her eye. It was scrawled in a hurried, jagged handwriting, a list of names, each one underlined repeatedly. Her heart sank as she recognized one of them, her own. "Why was my name here?" she murmured, the words thick with disbelief. She barely registered the door slamming shut behind her. The click of the lock echoed ominously, footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate, yet growing nearer, feeding her panic. She turned toward the door, wanting to pound on it, scream for help. But her voice was trapped in her throat, frozen in the knowledge that nobody would hear her, nobody cared. The footsteps stopped just outside, a pause that felt like a heavy weight pressing against her chest. She held her breath, heart hammering, praying it was an illusion, a figment of her fraught mind. Then, a voice seeped through the door, smooth and chilling. "You found it, didn't you?" It was the same whisper from before, now laced with a sickening glee. The edges of her vision blurred, dread enveloped her once more. "Who are you?" she shouted, the rage bubbling over her fear. "What do you want?" The silence stretched on, but she heard something else, a soft giggle, unnaturally high, a sound that should have belonged to children, not the shadows of a haunted school. It was mocking her, dancing along the edges of her sanity. Suddenly, the papers on the desk began to flutter, as if a gust of wind had swept through the room. They cascaded off the desk and scattered across the floor, revealing a trail that beckoned her to follow. But she resisted. She wouldn't give in, she couldn't but curiosity clawed at her brain, urging her to lean closer, to uncover the truth behind the names. Would this be her salvation or her doom? The choice felt agonizingly real now. Before she could decide, the door rattled violently as if something or someone was desperate to get in. Sarah stumbled back, her hands tightening around the edge of the desk, bracing herself as the door groaned under pressure. And then, with a loud crack, it burst open. Shrouded in darkness, the figure surged forward like an apparition, silhouetted against the dim light. "Sarah," it breathed, echoing the promise of something darker. The name rolled off its tongue with a sickly sweetness, as if it was tasting the very fear she exuded. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She turned to flee, her instincts guiding her as she plunged into the chaos of scattered papers. But as she looked back, the figure loomed larger than before, and its eyes glimmered with something insatiable. "Run if you must," it chuckled, an unnerving sound that twisted in her gut. "But you cannot escape your fate." With a roar, she bolted for the only way out, the door behind her. What lay beyond the threshold? One thing was clear, she was about to uncover a truth worse than any nightmare that haunted her, and it was hunting her down. The chase was far from over. What awaited? Sarah outside would shatter everything she knew, but she had to know. What secrets did Maplewood School hold, and who was the real watcher? The moment Sarah crossed through the door, the dim light of the hall felt like a distant memory. She sprinted, feet pounding against the floor, heart racing in sync with the rhythm of her rising panic. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, a desperate surge of energy that urged her onward, away from that figure and its ominous promise. But the corridor stretched infinitely ahead, shadows wrapping around her like wooden vines, coaxing her to slow down. She glanced back once, terror squeezing her throat as the silhouette lingered at the entrance, a grotesque distortion of familiar features twisting into an unsettling grin. "Sarah," the whisper trailed after her, teasing, echoing in her mind. With each step, dread clawed at her back, threatening to pull her under. She had to keep moving. She had to escape. As she rounded a corner, the stark walls began to morph, blood-like streaks appeared, creeping along the surface, tracing patterns that made her stomach twist. She hesitated, staring at the crimson lines that seemed to pulse with an unholy life. Were they always there, or had they materialized in her wake? Drowning in questions, she pressed on until the familiar sounds of Maplewood School faded into an eerie hush. Her breaths turned ragged as she stumbled across a door marked "Staff Only." It looked deceptively benign, but something about it glimmered with possibility. Could it be her way out? Without hesitating, Sarah yanked the handle, praying it wouldn't be locked. The door swung open with a creak, revealing a small stairwell that spiraled into darkness. Her instincts fought furiously against each other, the temptation to explore the shadowed depths or flee back to the chaos above. Before she could think too long, another giggle floated through the air, this one closer, sharper. It lanced through her resolve, pushing her feet into the stairwell and down the steps, into the sweltering embrace of shadows. The air became thick, almost tangible, wrapping around her limbs like tendrils of a predator. With each step, the chill of the darkness seeped further into her bones. She shivered, a cold sweat trickling down her back. Halfway down, the stairs leveled off into a small, windowless room. Dim, flickering lights illuminated a collection of oddities, old photos hanging crookedly on stained walls, and rusted desks piled high with ancient textbooks and dusty relics of forgotten lessons. Something glinted in the corner, catching her eye, an old mirror draped in a dusty cloth. Hesitation gripped her. A mirror would show her what lurked behind her, wouldn't it? But dread gnawed at her gut. What if the vision was worse than the reality? Then she heard it again, the voice, more forceful this time, an urgent whisper that sent frigid spikes down her spine. "You can't hide. To know or not to know? The mirror felt magnetic, pulling her deeper. Trembling, she reached out, fingers brushing against the torn fabric. She hesitated before yanking it away. What would reflect back at her? Fear? The figure? As the cloth came off, the surface shimmered like water. Images blinked to life, swirling within the glass. Faces. Each one familiar, connected by threads of despair that seemed to wrap tightly around her mind, suffocating any sanity left. Your name is part of the story, it whispered, unrelenting. And your fate has already been sealed, and just like that, the mirror shattered, shards flying through the air like daggers. The echoes of laughter returned, a cacophony of children hauntingly delighted with her panic. The room twisted impossibly, as those whispers began to morph into screams. Driven by a mix of terror and pure instinct, Sarah bolted from the room, heart racing as the walls seemed to constrict around her, whipping her back toward the stench of despair she thought she had fled. But above the screams, the voice rang louder than ever, more commanding, more surging. Come back to me, Sarah. You cannot escape. She skidded around the corner just in time to glimpse a flash of darkness moving after her, alive, hungry, relentless. As she stumbled into the next hallway, the walls were closing in. But a door stood ajar at the end. Was this the way out? Or would she step straight into her destiny? Breathless and shaking, Sarah lunged towards it, the echoing footsteps behind her quickening, pulsating like a heartbeat. What awaited her beyond the door? Each second felt like a ticking bomb ready to explode. Each moment weighed with the certainty that every choice mattered. Would she find the truth and survive, or would she become just another haunting echo in the halls of Maplewood School? As Sarah reached the door, her fingers trembled against the cold metallic handle. The echoing darkness behind her shifted, the laugh morphing into a growl that sent chills racing through her spine. She yanked the door, intent on whatever lay beyond, praying it wouldn't be locked. It swung open. The room inside was vast, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that strained against the oppressive gloom. The air lurked heavy with the scent of mildew and something metallic. Blood? No. Just the rot of old wood and forgotten memories. She stepped in cautiously, eyes darting, searching the space for some sign of safety or refuge. The moment she crossed the threshold, she felt an unsettling shift, like the house itself had exhaled, welcoming her into its ominous core. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving her in a suffocating silence, broken only by her rapid breathing. That a whisper rippled through the room, slow and liquid, curling around her until it swam into her ears like an unwelcome guest. Sarah, welcome to your past. Heart racing, she turned to find the source. The far wall was lined with photographs, each one depicting groups of children's smiling faces, eyes glistening with happiness. But there was something off about them. They seemed to watch her, their expressions shifting with the flicker of the lights, turning from joy to malignance. One photo, larger than the others, caught her eye. In the foreground stood a girl with wild hair and an unnerving grin. The moment Sarah focused on the face, a jolt of recognition cracked through her. It was her, as a child. She felt her pulse quicken. As if sensing her shock, the lights flickered violently, and the laughter returned, louder, warping from delight into a sinister chant. Sarah, Sarah, stop it. She screamed, but the sound echoed back at her, twisted and mocking. Panic surged as she moved toward another door at the opposite end of the room. She had to find an exit, had to escape this hall of mirrors, this gallery of her own darkness. But the whispers warped into noises, a cacophony of voices shouting her name, beckoning her, pleading, and taunting all at once. As she approached the door, it looked older, dust clinging to the edges. She yanked it open, only to stumble into another corridor, this one eerily familiar, as if she knew exactly where it would lead. Shadows writhed against the walls, stretching and twisting, forming grotesque figures that lurked just out of sight. Sarah, come back. The voice became a low, guttural command that resonated in her bones. The floor beneath her shifted, as if trying to swallow her. But with sheer determination, she pressed on, her feet pounding against the boards. She darted into another room, the door slamming shut behind her once more. This one was small and cramped, lined with trophies and old plaques, remnants of victories long since tarnished. In the middle of the room sat a battered desk, a flickering light bulb hanging above it, swinging ever so slightly, as if someone had just risen from the chair. A chill ran down her back as she approached the desk. A piece of paper lay sprawled across its surface. It was a report card, hers from many years ago, dated and stained. She remembered the pride her parents felt when she brought it home, the bright A shining at the top. But underneath, in creeping red ink, were dark notations: needs improvement, behavior issues, potential danger. Dread bubbled in her throat, choking her. There was something sinister about those words, creeping like vines around her sanity. She needed to escape, to break free from these memories, these expectations twisting into shadows. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a chuckle echoed through the room. You can't run from what you are, Sarah. The door she entered through rattled under a violent pounding as a shadow forced itself against it. The figure behind it was undeniable, that same grin etched deep into its face. Time was running out. With the realization that she might not survive this encounter, she turned her back on the desk, on her haunting past, and bolted toward the far wall. The only way out was through the shadows. But what would she have to confront to escape? As she threw herself at the wall, darkness seeped in like oil, thick and consuming. Would she find a way out, or would the walls of Maplewood trap her forever, locking her fate alongside the echoes of her past? The pause before the churning terror felt eternal, spiraling as she smashed into the unknown. Would this lead her to freedom or deeper into the darkness that had claimed so many before her? The moment Sarah plunged into the darkness, it enveloped her like a shroud, wrapping around her limbs and pulling her under. Cold spiked through her veins, and she gasped for breath. The world around her was an endless void, shifting, pulsating. She clawed at the walls that weren't there, fighting against the nothingness, panic clawing at her throat. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the void spit her out onto a cold tile floor, slick and unyielding. She lay there, gasping, trying to gather her scattered thoughts. A single overhead light swung above her, casting sharp shadows across the room that seemed to dance and sway. When she pushed herself up, she realized she was in a bathroom, the remnants of a shattered mirror scattered across the floor, reflecting the twisted angles of her panic-stricken face. But the reflection was warped, distorted by the shattered glass, and the eyes staring back at her weren't just hers. Shadows of other faces flickered at the edges before disappearing into the deep recesses of darkness. Sarah, the whisper echoed, sharper now, dripping with malice. It seeped from the cracks in the walls, curling around her fears. She stumbled back, heart thudding painfully against her chest. "Get out!" she shouted. But the only answer was the mocking echo of her voice, twisting back at her. She spun around, searching desperately for an exit, anything that would lead her away from this nightmare. A low hum vibrated through the room, emanating from a vent above. It felt alive, crawling over her skin, prompting the hairs on her neck to stand. Just then, the door started to shake. It rattled violently, as if something on the other side was trying to break through, that same sinister figure with its chilling grin. A fierce thud resounded against the wood, and her heart raced. "Sarah!" The voice called again, but this time it was different. It was deeper, more commanding, carrying an undeniable authority that made her bones chill. With a surge of adrenaline, she dashed toward a small window high on the wall. She pushed against the glass, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it was solidified, a prison meant to contain not just her body but her very soul. "There's no escape," came the voice again, now suffused with laughter that sent shivers racing down her spine. It felt impossibly close. Fear gripped her throat and squeezed. In desperation, she turned back to the door, hands pressed against the flimsy wood. She could hear the grunting breaths of the presence outside, waiting, hungry. "Let me out!" she screamed, pounding on the door with all her might. "Please!" But the walls remained indifferent, silent witnesses to her torment. The shadows writhing around her began to close in, and she felt their icy tendrils creeping over her skin. She gasped as they tightened around her wrists, dragging her back. "No, no, no!" She cried out, kicking, fighting with all her strength, but the shadows were relentless, dragging her closer to the floor. Just as she felt the grip tighten, a blinding flash of light erupted around her, illuminating the room in an eerie glow. The shadows recoiled, releasing her as they shrank back, and the door cracked open. Her heart raced as she peered through the small gap. The hallway beyond was dark and swirling with mist. "Now, Sarah. Go." The booming voice compelled her, shaking her to the core. She wasted no time. She bolted through the open door, the shadows howling behind her, a cacophony of rage and despair. As she dashed forward, the sound of footsteps echoed above the cacophony. Dark figures emerged, dripping with malice, their grotesque forms blending into the shadows. Each breath she took felt laced with panic, an urgency to escape whatever haunted her. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, a labyrinth designed specifically for her torture. She pushed past the shrouded figures, feeling their cold breath against her neck as they reached for her, and there it was again, the gut-wrenching laugh, drawing her back into its web of terror. She could feel the weight of the memories crashing against her mind. Old fears, buried deep, clawing their way back to the surface. She stopped suddenly at the crossroads. 3 doors stood before her, each dark and foreboding. Which one would lead to her salvation? Which would plunge her further into the horror that had been waiting for her return? The shadows behind her whispered, coaxing her back, but one glimmer of hope struck her. She knew if she chose wrong, it wouldn't just be her past haunting her, it would consume her entirely. With a small victory over her fear, she reached for the door that was slightly ajar, a faint light flickering from within. But before she could push it open, a bone-deep shriek filled the hall, reverberating through her very soul. "Choose wisely, Sarah." Her breath caught in her throat. The choice wasn't just about escape, it was about facing the truth lurking there. Would she find answers or further entangle herself in her own darkness? As she hesitated, the echo of the shriek danced around her, a reminder that time was running out. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, ready to confront whatever awaited her. Would she embrace the light or be swallowed by the darkness? The door creaked open at her touch, a reluctant greeting. A startled breath escaped her lips as light poured into the hallway, illuminating a room that smelled of damp earth and decay. The flickering bulb above trembled like her heartbeat, casting sharp shadows that danced in rhythm with her rising dread. Beyond the threshold lay what seemed like a small cellar. Cobwebs hung like curtains, dust motes swirling in the stream of light. The walls were lined with shelves that sagged under the weight of jars filled with murky liquid, some bubbling ominously, others still and murky as night. "Sarah, come!" And the voice slithered through the air, beckoning her, thick with an allure she couldn't ignore. She stepped inside, feeling an icy draft slide through her, chilling her to the bone. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. Panic surged as she turned to the door, but it felt immovable, as if the very air conspired to keep her trapped. "Choose wisely," the voice echoed again, now surrounding her, like the walls were speaking. It was intimately familiar, a haunting reminder of a life she thought she had left behind. "Who are you?" she shouted, and her voice echoed with fear back at her. The silence stretched like taffy before swallowing her whole. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, the shelves revealed their terrible treasures, mementos of her past, broken toys, yellowed photographs of smiling faces twisted into horror, love letters stained with tears, and pieces of memories she longed to forget. They called to her, each one a step deeper into the labyrinth of torment. Her heart raced as she reached for the nearest jar, the darkness inside swirling like a storm. An impulse urged her to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed the glass, a jolt of energy rippled through her, and an image flashed before her. The first time she encountered terror, the moment it settled deep within her. A soft giggle, innocent yet twisted, echoed in her memory. "Sarah loves to play." It was her sister's voice, a reminder of laughter turned to screams. "No!" she gasped, pulling back, jolted by the resurgence of guilt. The air thickened, wrapping around her senses. More figures emerged from the shadows of the cellar, shrouded in darkness, eyes gleaming in the half-light. They were familiar yet wrong, reflections of her past looming large. "Join us," they sang in a haunting harmony, reaching out with skeletal hands. She could feel their grasp invading her thoughts, pulling her into their chaotic web. Desperation clawed at her throat as she spun to face the other shelves, searching for any alternative. A door, slightly ajar, caught her eye. It looked like a passageway to safety, a promise of escape. She felt the warmth of hope flicker within her like a dying flame. She took a step toward it, but the figures hissed, their faces shifting from sorrowful to rageful. "Stay with us," they whispered, their voices dripping with dark allure like honey laced with poison. A struggle raged within her, a pull toward the familiar darkness that threatened to consume her, and a push toward the unknown salvation that shimmered almost mockingly in the distance. "Sarah, don't leave us. Remember," the echoes pleaded. A tangled web of secrets hung in the air, each one tightening like a noose. Breathless and trembling, she glanced back at the light spilling from the ajar door. Her choice loomed, a massive weight atop her chest. Should she confront the horrors that awaited her or delve deeper into the darkness of her past? The light flickered violently. "Choose now," it screamed, just as the shadows lunged. In one frantic burst, she dove for the door, hoping for escape. Would the light save her, or would it only lead her deeper into her own twisted fate? As she reached for the handle, she felt cold grasping hands pull at her ankles, dragging her back into the darkness. And then, just as the shadows threatened to claim her, she felt a spark within her, an ember of defiance igniting her spirit. "Enough!" She screamed, and the scream pierced through the chaos, momentarily silencing the cries around her. The moment hung heavy. Would she break free or succumb to the darkness brewing inside her? The door teetered on its hinges, a thread and a promise, as the shadows writhed in anticipation, a cold hunger swirling in their depths. What awaited her across the threshold? Perhaps salvation, or perhaps her final damnation? The darkness swallowed her whole as she wrestled against the hands tugging at her, relentless as they fought to drag her back into their shadowy embrace. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear pulsing in rhythm with her desperate thoughts. "Let go!" she yelled, breaking into a sprint toward the door. With every step she took, darkness clawed deeper, whispers wrapping around her mind like a vice. "Stay with us, Sarah, don't be foolish." Remember, the voices twisted and morphed, feeding off her fear. She slammed into the door, its surface icy under her palms, fighting against the increasing weight of the shadows pressing in on her. She closed her eyes for a split second, a fleeting moment to focus. In that silence, she felt it, the weight of her past, heavy and suffocating, but also the spark of defiance igniting inside her, pushing back against the darkness that so desperately wanted her. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice raw with a mixture of anger and fear. She twisted the doorknob with all her might, and it gave way with a painful creak. The door swung open, revealing nothing but an empty, swirling void, yet it felt different, inviting, warm, a breath of fresh air beckoning her forward. But the figures recoiled, their faces contorting into ghastly expressions, rage blanketing the sorrow that once cloaked them. "You can't escape!" they hissed, the chorus of shadowy voices rising like a crescendo of madness. Sarah hesitated just long enough for one of the figures to lunge, its icy fingers brushing her ankle. A jolt of terror coursed through her, but she couldn't let it win. She pushed through the door, not knowing what lay beyond, but aware that staying would mean certain doom. As she flung herself into the void, the world around her shifted violently. A whirlwind of blackness pinched and pricked at her skin, forcing her to squeeze her eyes shut. The warmth turned to ice, and she plummeted. The breath was ripped from her lungs, and despite the suffocating grip of fear, she forced herself to believe in the light that had once called to her. She landed hard, on something cold and unyielding. Even with her eyes squeezed shut, the roar of the shadows faded to whispers. A soft glow broke through the darkness when she finally dared to peek. Before her stood another room, eerily familiar. The children's laughter echoed, screams of joy intertwined with something darker, something she couldn't identify but that twisted in her gut. Toy trucks lay scattered on the once cheerful floor, alongside broken dolls with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. "Welcome to the past, Sarah," a soft voice chimed, sending tremors through her body. It seemed timeless, hauntingly innocent yet steeped in sorrow. Cracking remnants of laughter bubbled up through her memories, taunting her. She was back home. She stepped inside, unease crawling beneath her skin. Disjointed memories reassembled themselves around her with each breath, the birthday parties, the shared secrets, and the eventual screams that haunted her nights. Would she find a way through this flickering maze of twisted nostalgia? As Sarah ventured deeper into what was once her haven, a figure appeared in the dim light, a child, just like she used to be, standing in the center of the room, eyes wide and filled with something akin to fear or perhaps longing. "Help me," it whimpered, and the sound echoed in the hollow of her heart. Unexpected memories of her sister surged like a tide, washing over her with waves of worry and guilt. The child reached out, small fingers trembling. Was it her sister? Or something far more sinister? But before she could approach, shadows slithered through the corners of the room, darkening the light that had begun to grow. The call was clear, the choice urgent. Would she save the child, yet risk sinking deeper into the darkness of her past? As she took a step forward, the shadows erupted around her, and the child's desperate plea morphed into a chilling laugh. "Come play with us, Sarah, forever." What lay ahead? Would she succumb to the dark laughter of those she thought she'd left behind, or find her way into the light drawing ever closer? Sarah's heart raced, hammering against her chest like an animal trapped in a cage. The child's eyes, so familiar yet full of despair, clutched at her. A gut-wrenching urge to help churned within her, but fear chained her to the spot. The shadows wove tighter, their tendrils wrapping around her ankles, threatening to pull her back into their darkness. "Help me," the child's voice trembled, the innocence masked by a layer of palpable dread. With a swift resolve born of desperation, Sarah willed herself to take a step closer. But the moment her foot brushed the floor, the sound of sinister laughter reverberated through the air. It was a twisted echo of her childhood, a blend of mirth and malice. The room distorted, objects swirling like a whirlwind of memories threatening to swallow her whole. "Sarah!" The icy breath of shadows hissed. "Stay with us." Glimmers of her past flashed before her like old film reels. Faces of friends, laughs lost to time, the sun-drenched summers tainted by something darker. What had she forgotten? She closed her eyes tightly, summoning every shred of willpower. She remembered the warmth of her sister's hand, the light in their shared smiles. "You're not real," she shouted, voice splitting the whispers surrounding her. The darkness shuddered, recoiling as if her words struck the core of its very being. A moment of clarity broke through. The door to escape was still open behind her. It was an option. She could still run. But then she glanced back to the child, that familiar face twisted in fear. Was she abandoning her sister? "Can you trust her?" The shadows crooned, their voices spiraling up and down like a haunting melody. Look closely. The child's features shifted ever so slightly, morphing into a blend of familiarity. Was it really her sister? A wave of memories crashed over Sarah, laughter shared, secrets whispered, promises made. But then darkness seeped in the night. Her sister vanished, the screams that had shattered their once happy home. "Help me!" The child, no more than a whisper's distance, outstretched a tiny hand, and Sarah felt an inexplicable pull. Could she endure the heartache of confronting buried truths? She clutched her throat, breathing shallow, fighting the urge to believe. "Are you really here? Do it. Save her," urged a new voice, fierce and commanding. It felt like her own, but sharper, desperate for a resolution. The shadows writhed around her, claws tugging at her mind, invading her thoughts. She could hear the remnants of laughter becoming a cacophony of terror, paralyzing her every instinct. Outside her memory, the room distorted further, mirroring her turmoil. "Sarah, please," the child insisted, desperation laced through the voice, tightening like a noose around her heart. Time seemed to freeze as she considered. If she helped, would she enter a trap? Was the darkness merely seeking to consume yet another? In that split second, she was hit by a revelation. Every choice she had made led her to this point, dragging her into the abyss. But what if this was the chance, perhaps the only chance, to pull her sister back from the brink? With a sudden surge of courage, she raced forward, the shadows lunging to seize her once more. "Let go!" She screamed into the void, grasping for the child's trembling hand. Fingers barely brushing the palm, she felt a sudden jolt. A blinding pain radiated through her. Images exploded in her mind, the room twisting into chaos as secrets scattered like autumn leaves in a storm. But before she could grasp any more, a deafening silence flooded the room, leaving her hanging in a void. In that eerie stillness, the shadows whispered a final threat. You've made your choice now, face the truth. Her breath caught, heart racing again. She looked around, disoriented and scared. Had she chosen right? Nothing but darkness surrounded her, and in that silence, a single chilling question lingered. What would the shadows reveal next? In the void, Sarah's heart beat wildly, an echo of the choices she'd made, the whispers of darkness receding into the background. The air hung thick with an anxiety that twisted her stomach. But before fear could grip her again, something shifted. Shapes began to materialize in the void, swirling into focus. The child stood before her, body illuminated by a soft, otherworldly glow. Fear melted into desperate hope as Sarah grasped the haunting familiarity of the face. Is it you? She whispered, almost afraid to breathe, as her heart raced with recognition. Help me, the child said again, a fragile plea that pierced through the remnants of dread. You came for me. With renewed determination, Sarah took a step forward. I'm here, she responded, voice steady despite the tumult in her chest. As her hand reached out to grasp the child's small fingers, the world surged and shifted, memories flooding in like a tidal wave, pulling the child toward her. Sarah felt a surge of energy pulse through their contact. It was as if warmth, long buried beneath layers of fear and shadows, began to surface. Facades of darkness flickered around them, threatening to pull them apart but growing weaker with each heartbeat shared between them. What do I do? Sarah demanded, urgency driving her words. How do I save you? The child's gaze twinkled, holding a wisdom that transcended the innocence of her form. Let go of the past. Forgive, and we can be free. With a gasp, Sarah felt the weight of regrets and fears collide inside her, a lifetime of twisted memories, shadows of blame, and lingering guilt. How could she let go of the night she had lost so much? The anguish of unanswered questions gnawed at her insides. But somewhere deep down, a flicker of realization ignited. The shadows thrived on her fears. Each secret bound her tighter to the darkness, keeping her trapped in the same haunting cycles. In order to embrace the light, she could no longer hide. Forgive, she murmured, testing the word, feeling it caress her tongue like a long-forgotten tune. I can do that. In that moment, a rush of warmth surged through her heart, a balm against the pain. She pulled the child closer, her own tears spilling over as they pooled between them. I'm sorry, she whispered, words laden with years of sorrow. I'm sorry for everything. For not protecting you. For not trying hard enough. And it was as if the very fabric of the shadows began to unravel. The laughter that once echoed as embers of torment morphed into echoes of joy, a cacophony of reconciliation. Sarah let her pain wash over her like a cleansing rain. Memories of shared laughter and carefree days filled her mind, pushing through the darkness, reclaiming the joy that had been tainted for too long. The shadows began to dissolve, fading like smoke in the breeze. The child smiled, and with that smile, an impossible warmth ignited in the air, illuminating the space around them. Thank you, came the soft whisper. Now we can be free. Bright light enveloped them, spilling gold and warmth, flooding away the long-held fears. Then, as the darkness receded, Sarah felt a strange sensation of weight lifting from her chest. She could breathe freely, each breath laced with relief and purpose. But what lay ahead? She had faced her deepest pain, now she would face what awaited. All around them, the landscape began to shift, reshaping into the soft hues of dawn spilling over Maplewood Heights. The familiar streets emerged, crisp and vibrant, as laughter threaded through the air like a favorite song. Side by side, Sarah and the child stepped into this new light. Together, she said softly, a promise that echoed within her heart. In a moment of clarity, she realized you never truly lose the connections forged in love. She could carry the memories of those she had lost as guiding lights, and in turn, weave new stories rooted in hope and healing. As the sun rose, illuminating the path before them, Sarah felt the weight of the world lift. Maplewood Heights stood brighter than before, filled with possibilities instead of shadows. With a final glance back into the fading darkness, she felt gratitude for the pain that had pushed her here, a journey that no longer defined her but taught her so much. Together with the child, a luminous fragment of her heart, she stepped forward, ready to embrace her future. As they walked into this blossoming dawn, her path was clear, illuminated by the very truths once shrouded in shadows. Hope thrives where fears are laid to rest. Sprinkling light into the memories of darkness, Sarah knew this was just the beginning of their story and narrative where love arises from loss, lighting the way toward new beginnings. Remember, the shadows may be relentless, but they hold no power over you if you choose to shine. If you loved this conclusion, don't wait. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Let us boost this to more fans. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. I want to hear your thoughts, and for the love of everything that's good, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and don't let this story end here. You need to subscribe now.